The accelerated attacks on liberty started quickly after 9/11. Within weeks, the Patriot Act was overwhelmingly passed by Congress. Though the final version was unavailable up to a few hours before the vote, no member had sufficient time to read or understand it. Political fear of not doing something, even something harmful, drove the members of Congress to not question the contents and just voted for it. A little less freedom for a little more perceived safety was considered a fair trade-off, and the majority of Americans applauded. The Patriot Act, though, severely eroded the system of checks and balances by giving the government the power to spy on law-abiding citizens without judicial supervision. The several provisions that undermine the liberties of all Americans include sneak and peek searches, a broadened and more vague definition of domestic terrorism, allowing the FBI access to libraries and bookstore records without search warrants or probable cause, easier FBI initiation of wiretaps and searches, as well as roving wiretaps, easier access to information on American citizens' use of the Internet, and easier access to email and financial records of all American citizens. The attack on privacy has not relented over the past 6 years. The Military Commissions Act is a particularly egregious piece of legislation, and if not repealed, will change America for the worse, as the powers unconstitutionally granted to the executive branch are used and abused. This act grants excessive authority to use secretive military commissions outside of places where active hostilities are going on. The Military Commissions Act permits torture, arbitrary detention of American citizens as unlawful enemy combatants at the full discretion of the President and without the right of habeas corpus, and warrantless searches by the NSA. It also gives to the President the power to imprison individuals based on secret testimony. Since 9/11, presidential signing statements designating portions of legislation that the President does not intend to follow, though not legal under the Constitution, have enormously multiplied. Unconstitutional executive orders are numerous and mischievous and need to be curtailed. Extraordinary rendition to secret prisons around the world has been widely engaged in, though obviously extra-legal. A growing concern in the post-9/11 environment is the federal government's list of potential terrorists based on secret evidence. Mistakes are made, and sometimes it is virtually impossible to get one's name removed, even though the accused is totally innocent of any wrongdoing. A national ID card is now in the process of being implemented. It's called the Real ID card and is tied to our Social Security numbers and our state driver's license. If Real ID is not stopped, it will become a national driver's license ID for all Americans. We will be required to carry our papers. Some of the least noticed and least discussed changes in the law were the changes made to the Insurrection Act of 1807 and to Posse Comitatus by the Defense Authorization Act of 2007. These changes pose a threat to the survival of our republic by giving the President the power to declare martial law for as little reason as to restore public order. The 1807 Act severely restricted the President in his use of the military within the United States borders, and the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 strengthened these restrictions with strict oversight by Congress. The new law allows the President to circumvent the restrictions of both laws. The Insurrection Act has now become the, quote, Enforcement of the Laws to Restore Public Order Act, close quote. This is hardly a title that suggests that the authors cared about or understood the nature of a constitutional republic. Now, martial law can be declared not just for insurrection, but also for natural disasters, public health reasons, terrorist attacks or incidents, or for the vague reason called other conditions. The President can call up the National Guard without congressional approval or the governor's approval, and even send these state guard troops into other states. The American Republic is in remnant status. The stage is set for our country eventually devolving into a military dictatorship, and few seem to care. These precedent-setting changes in the law are extremely dangerous and will change American jurisprudence forever if not revised. The beneficial results of our revolt against the King's abuses are about to be eliminated, and few members of Congress and few Americans are aware of the seriousness of the situation. Complacency and fear drive our legislation without any serious objection by our elected leaders. Sadly, though, those few who do object to this self-evident trend away from personal liberty and empire building overseas are portrayed as unpatriotic and uncaring. Though welfare and socialism always fails, opponents of them are said to lack compassion. Though opposition to totally unnecessary war should be the only moral position, the rhetoric is twisted to claim that patriots who oppose the war are not supporting the troops. The cliché, support the troops, is incessantly used as a substitute for the unacceptable notion of supporting the policy, no matter how flawed it may be. Unsound policy can never help the troops. Keeping the troops out of harm's way and out of wars unrelated to our national security is the only real way of protecting the troops. With this understanding, just who can claim the title of patriot? Before the war in the Middle East spreads and becomes a world conflict for which we'll be held responsible, or the liberties of all Americans become so suppressed we can no longer resist, much has to be done. Time is short, but our course of action should be clear. Resistance to illegal and unconstitutional usurpation of our rights is required. Each of us must choose which course of action we should take: education, conventional political action, or even peaceful civil disobedience to bring about necessary changes. But let it not be said that we did nothing. Let not those who love the power of the welfare warfare state label the dissenters of authoritarianism as unpatriotic or uncaring. Patriotism is more closely linked to dissent than it is to conformity and a blind desire for safety and security. Understanding the magnificent rewards of a free society makes us unbashful in its promotion, fully realizing that maximum wealth is created and the greatest chance for peace comes from a society respectful of individual liberty. And Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentleman.